So what we ended yesterday with was our corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, and consecutive interior angles, and looking how they relate to each other. And I mentioned yesterday that they do have a special property if the two lines that are being cut by a transversal are parallel. And that's what we're looking at today. So our first one is the corresponding angle theorem. If two angles are cut by a transversal, then the pair of corresponding angles are congruent. They're going to be congruent. So you don't have to write this down, or you can just write down that 2 and 7 are congruent. 2 and 6 are congruent, and 3 and 7. Since 2 and 6 are corresponding angles and the lines are parallel, it means that those two angles are congruent. They're the exact same. The same thing can be said about 3 and 7. Those are the exact same angles.
Michelle Meyer, please come to the office. Michelle Meyer.
So those two lines there, these two lines, color them red, make up the angles 1, 2, 3, and 4, yes? Well, if I move this down, doesn't that match up exactly? So the corresponding angles would be congruent. So that means for us that 1 and 5, 2 and 6, 3 and 7, 4 and 8 are all going to be congruent to each other. One is congruent with 5. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 6. Angle 7 is congruent to angle 3. And angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. That's our corresponding angles. Now, alternate interior angles, the two lines that are parallel are cut by transversal, then the pair of alternate interior angles are congruent. So that means for us that angles 3 and 6, angle 3 is going to be congruent to angle 6. Angle 4 is going to be congruent to angle 5. The alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. They're going to be the same. Any questions on this so far? Well, alternate exterior angles. Two parallel lines cut by transversal, then the pair of alternate exterior angles are congruent. So for us in this diagram, it'd be 1 and 8 are congruent. And then we'll have 2 and 7 are congruent because of our alternate exterior angles. And lastly, the consecutive interior angles. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pair of consecutive interior angles are?
Trey Duncan, please come to the office. Trey Duncan, please come to the office.
What? So if two lines are cut by a transversal, then the pair of consecutive interior angles are supplementary. They add up to be 180. So 3 and 5, 4 and 6 would add together to be 180, yes? Okay. So alternate interior angles told me that 3 and 6 are congruent. It also told me that 4 and 5 were congruent, yes? What do I know about 3 and 2? 3 and 2 are a special type of angle. last chapter. Starts with a V.
Vertical angles. Vertical angles are what? Congruent, yes? So I know that 3 and 2 are going to be the same measure. We also know that 1 and 4 are going to be the same, yes? Well, going from here, we could say that the
corresponding angles are congruent, right?
well, that is 1 and
5,
2 and
we already kind of said that, didn't we? From the way we have it marked. Alternate exterior angles
would be 1 and then we also have 2 and. Wait a minute, 7 and 6 are vertical angles, aren't they? So they would be congruent. 8 and 5 are vertical angles, so they're congruent, but wait a minute. With these 8 angles, how many different angles do I actually have? 2, right? There's only 2 real numbers that would plug in anywhere. Now we said 3 and 5 are consecutive interiors, so they add up to be 180, yes? Wait a minute, with those 2 measures, since any of them we mark would make a straight line, 1 and 3 would make a straight line, yes? So they're going to add together to be 180. So if we have 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal, most likely the angles are going to do one of 2 things. What? They're either going to be congruent or add together to be 180, because that's the only way we have it. So we look at this here. Out of these 8 angles, how many different numbers are we going to have? How many different numbers are we going to have? Let's see. 2, right? So looking at this here, so we do have, we're trying to find the measure of angle 2, the measure of angle 3, the measure of angle 4, the measure of angle 5, the measure of angle 6, the measure of angle 7, and the measure of angle 8. Which one of these angles can we figure out for sure? Since 1, really they didn't write it, but the measure of angle 1 is 120. Well, 1 and 4 are vertical angles, yes? So 4 would also be 120 degrees. Those are vertical angles. What's another angle that we could get? 5? And what would 5 be? Because? So why can we say 5 is 120? At angle 2. 1, because 1 and 5 are corresponding angles. Since we have 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal, the corresponding angles are congruent. But what can we say about 4 and 5? 4 and 5 are what? Not vertical. 4 and 5. Alternate interior angles, because they're on opposite sides of the transversal in between the 2 lines. And alternate interior angles are congruent. Alternate interior angles are congruent. Now we could say for angle 8, well, 5 and 8 are vertical angles, so they would have the same measure. But we could also say that 4 and 8 are corresponding angles. So they would be congruent because we have parallel lines. Well, what about 1 and 8? What are they? Alternate exterior angles. And since we have 2 parallel lines, the alternate exterior angles are congruent. So there's multiple ways we can look at these 4 angles that are 120, but any way we look at them, they're all going to be the same. Now we need to find 2, 3, 6, and 7. we can find either one of those first, but which one do we want to find first? Or which one do y'all want to find first? 3. 2 and 7 would be the same because they are alternate interior, yes? So if I could find 2 or 7, then I would have them both, yes? So we could find 3 or 2, because what does angle 1 and 2 do? Add up to 180. They are a linear pair, yes? So we can take 180 and subtract 120 to find the measure of angle 2. 180 minus 120 is? So the measure of angle 2 is 60 degrees. Really, I should have the degree marker on all these. But as we just said, 2 and 7 are alternate interior angles, so 7 is? So we're just missing 3 and 6. What are 2 and 6? Corresponding angles are going to be the same. So angle 6 is, and angle 3 is 60. Because again, when we say 2 lines are parallel, they do not intersect, yes? So it means their slopes are the same, the way that the lines are set up are going to be the exact same, yes? So that means all these angles have to match up. We have to have 180 and 180. Because if one of these angles isn't exactly the same, so 60 and 60, because if this 60 on the one here was any bigger, it means this line would actually be going more that way. So they would actually be coming closer to each other. And it wouldn't mean that they were not parallel. Questions on this here? Okay. Let's look at this one. We're wanting 1. Measure of angle 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we know that the measure of angle 3 is 75. What other angles do we know for sure? 2 is going to be 75 degrees because they are vertical angles. What other ones? 7 would be 75 degrees because angle 3 and 7 are corresponding angles. Yes. 6 would be 75 degrees. Because we can say it's corresponding with angle 2, or it's alternate interior angles with angle 3, or it's corresponding, so corresponding with 2, alternate interior with angle 3, or vertical angles with angle 7, because all of those show us that those are 75. And it doesn't matter which 2 we're talking about, because we can talk about 1 and 2, 2 and 4, 3 and 4, any of these 2 that make a straight line. We're taking 180 and subtracting 75 from it, because the 2 angles will add together to be 180. And this here would give us 105 degrees. We can say angle 4 is 105 degrees because 4 and 6 are consecutive interior angles, and consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Well, where can we go from there? Because angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles. 5 is going to be 105 degrees because we can say it corresponds with angle 1, or it's alternate interior angles with angle 4. And 108 is going to be 105.
Questions on this here? We're ready for the next one. Given angle 1 is 105 degrees. Find the measure of angle 4, the measure of angle 5, and the measure of angle 8. 8 would be 105 because of our what? 1 and 8 are, they are exterior, but what type? Alternate exterior angles, because alternate exterior angles with two parallel lines are congruent. What about 4? It would be 105 also, because they are vertical. Because alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding or consecutive interior angles, the angles themselves do not share a common vertex. There's one key feature to them. We're talking about two different lines. Now, 1 and 4 are vertical angles. 1 and 4 would be vertical angles. And that's how we could get it from here. Or 4 and 8 are corresponding.
Now what about 5? It's going to be 105 because 4 and 5 are alternate interior. 1 and 5 are what? Corresponding. They're in the same position. 5 and 8 are vertical angles. So any one of those would work because they are explaining it of how we got there, as long as we have the other pieces of information first. Any other questions on this here? Find the value of x. So when we look at these two here, we do have two parallel lines. So we know that 115 and x plus 5 are either going to add up to be 180 or congruent. Yes? Because that's the only two ways it works out. Now, let's go on and fill in. I'm going to fill in 115. Because angle 4 is 115, yes? What else in this here would be 115? Would x plus 5 be 115? No. What about the angle next to it over here? Because this would be 115 and down here would be 115. If I filled in the x plus 5, well, up here would be x plus 5. This would be x plus 5, and down here would be x plus 5, whatever that measure is, yes? Because those are the spots that match up for those given angles. So can we say that x plus 5 and 115 are congruent to each other? No. So what are they going to do? Add up to be 180. So if I want to find the value of x plus 5 plus 115 is equal to 180. Since those two angles, where x plus 5 is and 115, weren't congruent by a corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, or vertical angles, that most likely means they're got to be supplementary. We can combine like terms. Well, 115 plus 5 is? So x plus 120 equals 180. X is going to be 60. Now, if we go on and finish solving it out and subtract 120 from both sides, 180 minus 120 is 60. And that's it. Questions on this here? Find the value of x.
is 2x and 120. Are those corresponding angles? Are they alternate interior? Are they alternate exterior? Because alternate exterior, they both have to be on the outside, yes? Are they vertical angles? No. So is there any way that we can say 120 and 2x are congruent? No. They'd have to equal 180. Now, if we filled in, because alternate exterior would tell me that this 120 and this angle here would be congruent, yes? Wait a minute. Those two angles make a straight line, yes? So they have to add together to be 180. Because we could fill in the rest of them, but since we have this straight line here showing that they add together to be 180, we can go on and solve by saying 2x plus 120 is equal to 180. And what can we do first? We can. Since we're trying to get the variable by itself, we're going to subtract 120 from both sides. Because 120 minus 120 is 0. We have 2x is equal to So 2x equals 60. I want to get the x by itself. Divide both sides by 2. 2x divided by 2 is just going to be x is equal to 60 divided by 2 is 30. So the value of x is 30. And the value of angle would be 60 because 2 times 30 is 60. So that's one thing, especially on the homework, to be paying attention for, and probably on the test, is it asking for x or is it asking for the angle? Because just like in chapter 1, where it was asking for, some of it was asking for x, some of it was asking for the length of the line. Because if it's asking for the length of the line or the measure of the angle, we have to plug it back in. And heck, if it was asking for the measure of the angle, that would actually be easier. Because we know that 120, whatever 2x is, has to add together to be. So we could actually just subtract. Any questions on this here so far? What would we do for this here? Is 136 and 7x plus 9, are those alternate exterior angles? No, they're exterior, but they're not alternate. They're not on the opposite sides of the transversal. Now, are 136 and our 7x plus 9 corresponding angles? Because 136 is to the right and above, yes? And the other angle is to the right and above? Because the 7x plus 9 is below the other parallel line, yes? So they're not in the exact same position. So they're not corresponding. Are they alternate interior angles? No. So most likely these are going to do what? Add together be 180. Because if we take the 136, since it's just a number, or one of them, well, this angle down here would be 136. Alternate exterior would tell me that this is 136. And this here is 136, so these two here should add together to be 180. They make a straight line. We're starting to see that it's either they're going to be congruent or add together to be 180. So we can say that 7x plus 9 plus 136 is equal to 180. Well, there are no like terms with 7x. But 9 and 36 are like terms. So we can add those two together. 136 plus 9 is going to be 145. Now we have all the like terms together. Now we need to get them away from x. So addition and subtraction is going to be the easiest thing to do first. So we would subtract 145 from both sides.
Because 145 minus 145, these would cancel, leaving me with just 7x on this side. 180 minus 145 is 35. And last but not least, so we have 7x. I don't want to know what 7 times x is. I just want to know the value of x. So we would divide both sides by, because 7x divided by 7 would just give us x. And 35 divided by 7 is 5. Any questions on this here? Are we good with this here? Yes? Because I think we've only got one or two more. Two more. So we look at these two here, so 6y minus 3 and 129. So these two angles would add together to be 180, yes? These are alternate exterior angles. So they are congruent, so they are equal. Because if they are alternate exterior corresponding alternate interior angles, we said that these two angles are congruent. So that means for us that 6y minus 3 is equal to what? Because alternate interior and alternate exterior, these two angles are the same. They're going to be the same measure. So even if 129 was an actual equation, so 2y or 5y minus 7, we could still set those two equal to each other because they are the same. Now, we want to solve for y. Well, all the y's are already on the right side, yes? So let's get everything else to the other side. So the first thing we can do here is add 3 to both sides, because negative 3 plus 3 will become 0, which will tell us that 6y is equal to Now we don't have anything else being added or subtracted to y, but we do have a multiplication of 6 because we have 6 times y. So we would divide this by 6 and we would divide this by 6 because 6y divided by 6 would be just y. 132 divided by 6 is it should be 22, I believe. And that's it. That's all we have to do on this here. Any questions on any of this here so far? Are you ready for the last one? Given that the measure of angle 3 is 68 degrees, okay, I'd fill that in. And the measure of angle 8 is 2x plus 4. What is the value of x? Show your steps. Mm-hmm. Yep. So we can, 2 would be 68 also, yes. Yes. Exactly. It's a little tight for me to write that in. So is 2x plus 4 and 68, are they congruent? Are they the same? No, because none of those numbers lined up where 68 and 2x plus 4 ended up matching up with the same angle. So that means they do what? Add up to be 180. So we're saying that 2x plus 4 plus 68 degrees has to equal 180, because when we look at any of these, so these two here, those two angles make a straight line. They have to be 180. Well, we can combine like terms, which would be our 4 and 68. And 68 plus 4 is So 2x plus 72 would equal now at this point here we do need to get x by itself, so we would subtract 72 from both sides. Because 72 minus 72 will be 0. Now that does leave us with the 2x, or 2x plus 0 is equal to 108. And last but not least, we would divide both sides by 2 to get x by itself. And that's it. Any questions on any of this here? And that's it. Because the raindrop problem is exactly the same thing. It's just dealing with the same type of angles and showing that the light rays do reflect in the same manner. So your assignment for tonight is 4 through 10 even, and 11 and 12 on page 120.